do live on an ocean planet. About 70% of our planet's surface is ocean water. Out of that, only 2% is reef, just like this, and about 50% of all the marine life dwells around that tiny 2%. So extremely important about what happens out here. So if we didn't have healthy oceans, we'd have absolutely no chance at having a healthy planet. Now, I did mention that fire coral to everyone just a minute ago. Even as bad as that stuff is, I'm sure if any of us make contact with that, sooner or later we would heal up nicely from it. There's some corals down there that are razor sharp that could give you a very nasty cut. Now, I'm sure if that happened to any of us, sooner or later we would heal up nicely from that as well. Now, we could cause so much more damage to this coral, though, than it could ever do to us. Now, keep in mind that we do have bacteria that lives all over us. It's all over our skin, our hair, our clothes. It's been there forever, and that's completely unharmful to us. But that bacteria is extremely harmful and very foreign to this marine environment. If you were down there snorkeling or diving tonight, maybe the curiosity got the better of you. You just wanted to touch a piece of coral just to see what it felt like, or even accidentally brushed up against a piece of coral, say with maybe some of your dive gear, you would be doing a very, very damaging thing. Now, even the slightest brush from your index finger could break down dozens of coral polyps. That bacteria that dwells on you would be transmitted into those polyps, basically infecting that coral with your own personal disease. Now, not only would that one area that you touch be affected from that, since coral polyps do grow together in tight groups or colonies, that bacteria would spread throughout that whole colony. They're going to share that disease. So by that one curious or accidental touch, you could be killing coral that might be a relatively new piece of coral, or that coral could be several hundred years old. It doesn't really stand a good chance to recover after that either. I'm not saying that it couldn't recover, but if it did, you might not even see any signs of that recovery for close to 30 years after that touch. That's the main reason why we would never want to touch the coral. Now, if that's not good enough, though, there is one more reason why you would not want to touch the coral, and this one's more for the adults, though, because it could affect your finances. Now, all of these waters out here are part of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. Just like we couldn't go out to a state or national park and start cutting down some trees, you can't come out to the reef line and start gathering up our coral. Even the dead and broken coral you see out here along the reef line is equally as protected as the living coral itself. So if you were down there snorkeling or diving tonight, saw a nice piece of coral and decided to keep that for a souvenir, if you were ever caught doing that, you would be arrested. You would also have a pretty hefty fine to pay, and your fine would be determined on the weight of that piece of coral you decided to take from our water. For every ounce of coral in your possession, you're going to be charged around $500. So if you had a softball-sized piece of brain coral, that tiny piece of coral could set you back close to $8,000, and you're not even going to get to keep that very expensive piece of coral either. But realistically, you wouldn't want to keep it. Let's say you took that coral from the water, you definitely got away with it, made it back to your tour bus or your cruise ship or even your hotel room, stuck that piece of coral back inside your suitcase. Now, the only thing you'd have whenever you got home would be a very smelly piece of luggage and a piece of white limestone rock to go along with that. Now, the reason for that, you'd have to keep in mind that you took a living marine organism out of the water. It's going to die in your suitcase, and that will not smell pretty at all. The reason why it would be a piece of white limestone rock is what gives most corals their color as a single-celled algae that dwells within the coral polyps. So when that coral dies, the algae will be depleted, it will bleach itself out and reduce itself down to its exoskeleton. That's just a piece of white limestone rock, because most corals will lose their color when they die. Now, I did say most, and that could have some of you a little confused. If you went around to any of our gift shops in Key West, you're going to see some of our stores down here sell this nice, brightly colored coral. Now, what you're looking at in those gift shops, though, is coral that came from different parts of the world with less strict rules regarding their reef. It was dead coral. Somebody's taken the time to bleach it and then dye it or paint it, and that's pretty much all you're looking at in the shops. Now, there is a few exceptions to that rule, though. There are a few different varieties of corals that will retain their color after they die, and you ladies have probably heard of like red coral, black coral, maybe pink coral, usually made into some really fancy jewelry, and those will retain their color after they die. Now, that pink coral, though, is a really fine example of different types of corals and fish will inhabit around different ecosystems around the